Hey, Good Soil community, Pastor Marissa here. I wanted to take a minute today to talk a little bit about how we get ourselves ready for online communion. We've been doing these online communion services via Zoom for the last couple of months. Obviously, the best way to do communion would be if we were all together in the sanctuary and could pray together and be with one another. But because this pandemic rages on, we are finding new creative ways to commune with one another instead. So we've been doing this on Zoom, and this is intentional so that we can interact with each other and be in community in a live setting. When I say those words of institution, you hear them and we take communion together. So that's been a really good thing for us to do. So how exactly do we prepare ourselves for home communion? I have some things to help us. I also wanted to say that the most important thing to remember when it comes to home communion is that this is a sacrament, that in the Lutheran tradition, a sacrament is God's word paired with a regular element, that bread or wine or that water in the case of baptism. And when those two things are put together, something special happens. We hear from God. In communion, we receive the forgiveness of sins. We are reminded of the abundant gifts from God of life and salvation. We're strengthened in our faith. We are in community with one another and all of the saints. And we receive in communion a tangible sign of God's love for us in that bread and that wine. So when we do that at home, we want to be just as reverent as we are in church as well. So to add to that reverence, to make that space special, you might want to set aside a place in your home, maybe use some things that are spiritually meaningful to you. For example, this is a scarf that I got in the Holy Land a couple of years back. You might want to add a cross to your altar area, or maybe even a candle. Maybe you want to use a special plate or a cup that mean a lot to you or belong to a family member, or it can be just a regular plate or cup too. And then the elements. Bread, of course, for our bread element. You can use bread from a loaf, you can use pita, you can use a hamburger bun, but any sort of regular everyday bread will do. If you have a gluten sensitivity in your family, you can use gluten-free crackers too. So that's the bread. And then the wine can be any kind of regular everyday wine, could be red or white or sparkling or even grape juice, but that wine is what we use then for that second element. And never fear, if you do not have one of those, or you only have one of those, Martin Luther tells us that Christ comes to us, is present with us, Christ's body and blood in its wholeness in one of those elements alone. So you can use just the bread or just the wine and be participating fully in communion. Now our next online communion service via Zoom is going to happen on Ash Wednesday, which is the 17th of February at 5 p.m. And because this is the beginning of the Lenten season in the church, Ash Wednesday, I invite you to add one more thing to your altar, and that is a bowl of water. So know that you are invited to add that to your altar for our next online communion service, and I hope to see you then. Bye.